also good dialogue in writing is more than just saying what it is everybody is saying. It's showing what they're doing while they're saying what they're saying, and then why are they saying what they're saying, and how are they saying it, and all of that.
Hey, this is Writers Row, where we talk about the writing community on Twitter, talk about the business side of writing and the creative side of writing. I am one of your hosts, DC Wright-Hammer. I'm the author of the Between Two Minds series, which are science fiction thrillers available at wrighthammer.com and amazon.com. And I am joined, as always, by the other host,
David Gane, and I am the co-writer of the internationally award-winning series Shepherd and Wolf Mystery Series, which is about two teenage boys who chase serial killers. And we also have another person visiting us today, DC.
Yes, we do.
And you are?
I am Zev Good, and is this where I plug my book?
Please
I am
plug your book.
Of the short story collection A Map of the World, and the forthcoming novel All About the Benjamins.
Oh, interesting.
Yep.
When is that coming out?
Soon.
Okay. Sometime in this year or 2020?
This year.
Okay.
Yeah, like this, probably next month. Knock on
all wood.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, by the time this airs, who knows when next month actually is.
Right.
So it'll all work out. Want to remind viewers, if you like the content we've been putting out, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate that. Give this video a thumbs up, and we really want your thoughts in the comments down below. So make sure that you tell us what you like. You know, be a little easy on us if you don't like something. But if there's something else you want us to talk about, comments down below.
And what are we talking about this week, DC?
So, giving the viewers a little bit of background, both David and I have read A Map of the World by Zev Good, and we felt compelled to bring him on the show to talk about the concept of writing dialogue. We talked a little bit about it in other episodes, and I think that for the viewers who haven't read Zev's book, I think it's a really good example of writing dialogue that is accessible, relatable, just kind of immerses you in the story. And wanted to bring Zev on to talk about that. And so basically how I wanted to open the show was kind of putting Zev on the spot and really asking him the question, like, he's got all these relatable characters, all, these interesting storylines, but it's all held together. It's all like sort of sewn together by this dialogue that is just, it's just dialogue, but it's so creative. It works. It makes the story move forward. And so I just want to ask the open-ended question, like, what is your approach to dialogue? If you had to like sum it up, like, where are you pulling these conversations from, and how do you deliver that in your books?
Oh my God. I didn't expect the first question to be so like in depth.
How do you write perfect dialogue, Zev? Go.
You just have to. Sorry, I was just waving goodbye to my husband. He's going to bed.
Good night.
Good night. And I really don't know.
Okay.
And I don't approach it in a way where I'm thinking to myself, this dialogue that I'm writing has to, do this or whatever. And I'm the worst at explaining my process for anything. I mean, I sit down and I write. And then when I'm done, I stand back up, and then I go eat an apple and go have a beer or whatever. So when people ask me, how do you write dialogue? How do I write dialogue? You put it in and then you read it back to yourself, the royal you, we, and you act it out. And if it doesn't sound right or if it doesn't feel right, you rewrite it and then you read it aloud again. And you're acting it out and your dogs are staring at you like you've lost your mind, and you just keep getting it right and you rearrange the words and it just needs to sound like someone and a situation that you've been in. And but how do I do it? I don't know.
Okay, so when you are getting into it, you have an idea of who the character is, right? In your head?
I always start with a title, then I come up with characters, and then situations. And
Interesting.
yeah.
What-
that sounds very like interesting.
No, because
Intriguing.
a lot of people start with for me, I know a lot of people will start with the situation. Actually, no. Lately with the conversations I've been having with people who I've been helping out, they've talked to me a lot about what their characters are doing, but don't actually have a situation. They have to like figure that part out. So
Yeah.
maybe they are starting with character. Uh, I do want to ask this question though. So when you're acting it out, you're actually saying it out loud, pacing around the house
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
trying it out.
Yeah. And it's like a 24/7 thing. Well, not 24/7. I mean, I do sleep. But, it's as long as I'm awake, it's playing in my head. And, would Judy really say that? Would she say it that way? Would Dora Zittler, this, Holocaust survivor, would she say things this way? And so, like maybe the first draft of, the story, Somebody's Always Saying Goodbye, she spoke a lot more American. And then, of course, I tell myself, well, you know, Dora's Polish. She wouldn't sound like that. So then I go back and you put the accent in, but it has to be a realistic. It can't be like a what what you think an accent would sound like. It really has to be you heard that accent before, that syntax and that sort of like that pentameter of English being spoken by as a second language by a woman who has been here since the 50s. So she has a command of the language and yet still it is her second language. So you really have to, go to places and people who speak like that. Like you're not going to get it, at Walmart more than likely, unless I don't know, maybe if you're in New Jersey. But you know, here in Georgia, we're not going to get it at Walmart. So you have to go to where those people are, and you have to listen. And as writers, speaking for myself, I don't know about you guys, it's a very solitary life. Even as a kid, everything was very solitary. So you pay a lot of attention to the way things are said and who says them and how they say them and when they say them. And there's a lot of TV when you're a little gay Jewish kid in the South. And so you watch TV a lot and you see all of that, and it becomes you put it into what you write, and that performance becomes part of the process. I feel like I'm rambling right now, so maybe next question.
No,
Well,
actually, I really like it. So are you, when you are talking about your characters, usually you've encountered them somewhere in the real world?
Yes.
Not that like specific character, but at least from that background, correct?
Yes. Yes.
And then and this sounds like a maybe a silly question, but my memory isn't very good, so I don't always remember stuff like that. Are you one of those people that when you see stuff, it sticks with you and you hold on to it
Yeah.
and carry it with you?
Yes. I can remember my first day of kindergarten, and in the many moons ago, let's say. Um, I just remember everything, and I'm a fountain of completely useless information, pop culture references. Just if I see it, if I read it, especially, it'll stick with me. Not everything that I see, but if it really hits me, it'll stick. And so you see these people, and it sticks, and then they show up, and in the writing eventually, maybe not immediately, but they show up.
when
I really, oh, sorry, DC.
well, I was gonna say it's really like interesting because I am not gay nor Jewish, nor did I grow up in the South. And my experience was
No
very
one's
right, exactly. Uh, my experience was very similar, though. I was the youngest of three, and I was like 5 years younger than my closest sibling. And so my parents were kind of checked out by the time I was born. And so it was a very solitary is a very good word for it. I wasn't neglected, but it was very solitary. And so you would see like my dad and my uncle would get together and they were jovial, they were gregarious, they would have a few beers and they were loud and laughing, and you kind of pick up on those details. And I don't remember the exact words they said. I don't remember even what they were talking about, but I remember their tones, their intonation. I remember the emphasis. It was sort of imprinted on me. And
Yeah.
so when I think about middle-aged men who've had a few beers and they're having a good time, that is the imprint that comes to my mind. And if I'm writing a story where that happens, that imprint sort of gets put into the page. It gets put into the words.
Yeah.
And that's where I kind of like, because of the solitariness, I think that's why I gravitated to being a writer. I have these descriptions, I have the world in my head as I've seen it, and I need to kind of get it out of me. I need to put it on paper. And so I think that's a common thread. I think that's why I was able to relate to your book so much and why it was so accessible to me, even though, we come from worlds apart, and yet your book spoke to me in ways that I'm like, I noticed those things. I get those things. Like, not only just, it wasn't just the dialogue, because the dialogue I thought was good. It was the before and after, the actions before the dialogue. Like, what is someone doing with their hands or their mouth? Like, are they wiping their mouth? Are they anxious or this? And so some of the actions, and we talked about this in an episode before, show, don't tell. And I think people say that mantra a lot. And I think, like what you said, in your first draft, that might not come across. Like, you might just write an American accent for somebody who is a Holocaust survivor. But as you get in, you're like, how realistic is that? You start to do show, don't tell almost naturally. You say, once they become real characters, almost like real people on the page, you
Yeah.
start to flesh out and you make them real by what would somebody do? What have I seen people do in this scenario with their hands? What have I seen them do, with their face? How has their eyebrows reacted in this situation? And so I'm rambling, but I just think it's
But
pretty
yeah.
interesting.
But yeah. So Yes. You know, so much of dialogue is not just and we hear it all the time in my editor, and I love Deborah. Deborah, you will see this, and I love you. You're fabulous, but it's not all said. It's not all. And then we did this, she said. And then we did this, he said. And then she said this, and then he said this in response to what she said. Like, and I'm not saying it's the Nancy Drew. And if you've never read a Nancy Drew book, first of all, don't. But I read them as like palate cleansers. But if you read a Nancy Drew book and it's like, oh, let's have a party, Nancy said jovially. It's not that either. Like sometimes it's, I'm furious, she said, and tore her hair out by the roots and threw it on the ground and stomped on it, and like that's part of dialogue too. Like, and I know what the meaning of dialogue is, because dialogue is what is spoken, but also good dialogue in writing is more than just saying what it is everybody is saying. It's showing what they're doing while they're saying what they're saying, and then why are they saying what they're saying, and how are they saying it, and all of that. Like, so it's a performance. And if you're a writer and you're not performing your dialogue, maybe you need to start.
I kind of like two things you said. One thing was that, and I'm kind of taking my own version of it when I say this, but you were kind of saying how there's all the actions involved, as well as the dialogue, and it's we do communicate more than just through our words. We communicate through our gestures and our actions and the things that we don't say, and that kind of aspect, right? And then the other side of it, when I think about action, is for a while I've always said that dialogue is just action or reaction responses to the world, right? So kind of tying those two ideas together, I think really works out really well. When you are thinking about your characters, why are they doing what they're doing? What do they want? What actions are they taking to get that thing that they want? Or how are they responding when the world throws something back at them, right?
Right.
We don't always control our responses, and that communicates a lot about what we're feeling and thinking as well. So
yes, and the way that we try to control ourselves while we're in the middle of, for instance, in my forthcoming novel, All About the Benjamins, which will be available soon. One of the characters is really neurotic, and so I would give a line of dialogue and interrupt the line of dialogue with an action, and then finish the line of dialogue. But we do that, as humans, we say things and then we stop and we do something and then we finish it. Like I you're crazy, and then I pick up the empty beer bottle and I throw it across the room at you, and then I finish saying, and I don't want to ever see you again. And that confounds my editor, who I love, but she wants me to keep it to he said, she said, and all that, and it's not always that simple. It's not he said, she said.
Well,
there's also a rhythm built up in that breaking things up and what you say on one side versus the other side of that action, right? So,
Yeah.
well, and I want to give an example. So if my wife said, and I'll try to do it without emotion, "Are you going to wash the dishes?" Okay, so if she just says that without emotion, right? And that's
you're
the
in
way you
trouble,
read.
man.
That's
That's
what
what I'd say.
that's what you read on the page. "Are you going to wash the dishes?" That whole phrase can be changed by her putting her hands on her hips immediately after she says it. So if she says, "Are you going to wash the dishes?" She put her hands on her hips. Like suddenly she's like ready for business, like,
She's daring you to wash the dishes.
well, or not wash the dishes. Actually, that's what she's daring me to do. And so I think, like what David said, it's as much of what characters don't say. And I think, it's hard to master that, right? We try to do it, and I think personally, in my first book, I was not super great at it. I think the dialogue was enough to get by, and I think the show don't tell was okay. It was fine. I think the story really carried my first book, and I think the dialogue kind of was just there to help move it along. I think in my second book, I really put an emphasis on dialogue. I think I put an emphasis on pacing of the dialogue, like where you're like what you're saying, Zev. Give them a break. Like they say the first part of what they're gonna say, they do something, and then they say the second part. Like I really learned to do that in my second book more so than in my first book. And what I think that does is it gives, like, and I write science fiction thrillers. There's a lot of stuff going on, but I want to be able to strip that out in a conversation so the reader can sort of forget about the big world that I've built and just be in that conversation. And that's tough to do. You have to write really good dialogue to get them to forget everything that you've built for just a small, portion of the story so you can get this crucial discussion
Yeah,
through and then move them back into the story as you go.
right. I don't write science fiction or fantasy, and probably never will. Um, Maybe I will. I don't know, but no promises. But it's still the thing that interests us in things like Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, things like that, The Dragonbone Chair. I read a lot of it, and a lot of times, the dialogue is so, you know, florid, is that the word? Where it's so overdrawn that you're just like, oh my God, no one would talk like this, and like I get that this is a medieval world in another dimension. Like I can suspend disbelief, but I still want my characters to be relatable. And so, what's really getting these people to go on the quest for the ring, and to take the ring to Mordor and all that, is like given to us in their dialogue, and the things that they're saying, obviously in the things that they're doing, but in The Hobbit, the dragon mattered to me the least. It was more, I wanted to know all about, Bilbo Baggins and Gandalf and, Thorin and all the dwarves. I cannot remember their names right now because I've had, some bourbon. But, I want those interactions, and like that is what really keeps me reading. And I know, a lot of people may not feel the same way, but in your book, and I've read your first book, and I enjoyed it a lot. This is to DC, not to David. I have not read your book, but I will. I promise. I have like 175,000 books on my TBR pile right now, so
Mhm.
Don't hold your breath, but I will get
I'm 169,453, right?
exactly.
Yep.
And I keep adding things to them daily. I'm like, I'm not buying any more books, and then I buy 4 more books. So,
I'm the same way.
Story of my
but your story is just what gets it going, DC, and it's the interactions of the characters that you get invested in when you're reading science fiction, fantasy, it doesn't matter. And you need, and yours takes place in the future, but it still needs to be sort of grounded in the way that people talk to each other today. And I think you did actually pretty well with that. So,
Yeah. Well, yeah, you had mentioned there was a sort of a noir feeling with some of the flashbacks that I had in it.
oh yeah,
You're like one of the first people to pick up on. I don't want to digress too much of this episode, but I actually tried to craft the flashback sequences and the dialogue to bring it back to the episode to be more like today and give it a noir feeling like you had kind of picked up on to really to the sanitized future that the other character lives in. I wanted to really have a juxtaposition there, and I wanted to do it in a very overt way. And like you were one of the first people to actually call that out, so I thought that was really cool because in the future I had to like change some of the words like that people are saying. Like people they don't drink orange juice, they drink starfruit juice.
right.
Little things like that to make it seem futuristic, while having some previous scenes where they do talk like we talk and they do experience the things we experience, but also even making it feel a little older than that by they're driving in a boat of a car and the guy in the back seat, he does as much without talking as he does with talking. His sheer presence is almost dialogue in and of itself,
Yeah,
because you know what to say and what not to say because he's the boss.
yeah.
And so that's kind of what I was trying to accomplish in the first book there was a gangster-like feeling, this like very much pinstripes and cigars and that kind of feeling to it.
And you got it. So, kudos.
The one thing that we haven't really spoken about, like we've talked around it, but we never actually said it, is the idea of subtext. Do either of you have any thoughts or approaches when you're looking at the subtext of your dialogue?
Well, people lie. We lie. Are you going to wash the dishes? Of course I'm going to wash the dishes. Why would you even ask me that?
Right.
And it's a fucking lie. You're not going to wash the dishes. You're gonna leave those dishes in that sink until it becomes, like the greatest crisis of your marriage is what's going to happen to those dishes. But you don't say that. You don't say, I'm not going to wash those fucking dishes. You say, yeah, I'm going to wash the dishes. Don't worry about it. And then you don't wash the dishes. And then, but we know that we lie also. So, yeah, I'm going to wash the dishes. Okay. I roll, whatever. And, subtext. Actually, funny thing, the book that I have started, which is my third book, is actually about subtext. The things that we say and the things that we don't say, and how we use the things we say to mean things that we don't say. Does that make sense?
Can you unpack that a little bit?
Well, for instance, the title, because I always start with the title, is The Language of Birds.
Wait. Is that like a exclusive reveal? Did you just exclusively reveal that on Writers Row?
I
He's
exclusively
always looking for
actually,
this.
I think I exclusively revealed it on Twitter a couple months ago.
Nobody recognizes that.
Nobody pays attention to me.
Semi-exclusive reveal on Writers Row. Go on. Sorry.
Um, and birds don't waste their language. What birds say, bird song, is what, I need food, I need shelter, I'm looking for a mate, and the baby birds are, oh, I'm hungry, feed me. And the mama bird is, she goes and she finds food and she brings it back and she stuffs it down in the baby bird's mouth. And yet people say things that we don't mean. And then we mean things that we don't say. And if you can get that across in dialogue, you are doing really, really good. Because humans make everything more complicated than it is and than it should be. And the ritual, the mating ritual, for lack of a better term, it's like, are you interested in me? Of course I'm interested in you, but I'm also, married to, this lady over here, that I'm not going to tell you about. And, so there's things that don't get said that should get said between humans. And, the book, my forthcoming novel, All About the Benjamins, which will be available soon, is about a man who comes out of the closet after his wife dies. And so this is, 38 years of things that were said that were not true, things that were said that were true, things that were said that meant other things, things that were just not said at all. So, yeah.
Well, and I think it's our job as writers to take the story up to a point to where when the dialogue is said, where the lie escapes the mouth of a character, that the reader's in on it, right? Like,
Right.
They know it's a lie. Like, basically, like the main character has got to get to this other location by 7:00, and the person asks them, hey, can you have the dishes washed by 7:00? Oh yeah, no problem. Right? So we know the lie has come out. We know that something's got to give. And so that is where your dialogue can do more work if you've set it up.
Yes.
And I think that's a difficult thing to do early on when you're writing, because you're just kind of like this, then this, then this, then this. And I think in first drafts, I think that's fine. Get the story written. But as you're seeing opportunities where you have laid the groundwork for a lie, like really use that sort of equity that you've built with the reader, cash that in with this lie, because now you, the reader and the main character, are in on it. And the character they're lying to, it's sort of like the reader gets a chance to lie to that character too. And so you really got to take advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah. And I'll just, I'll put into, the dialogue attribution. It's like, he lied, she lied. Because the reader will already know at that point that whatever comes out of the character's mouth is going to be a lie. Which is why my editor gets furious at me, because I don't say said. I say lied, or, whatever, prevaricated. Use that as a verb, by the way. And don't anybody watching this use that as a verb. Don't do it. Zev Good did not tell you to use prevaricated as a verb.
One thing I actually used to do for my students in my one writing class is I would make them do scenes where the characters would want something from the other character, but they were never allowed to talk about it, and it always had to be through some other activity or action. So doing the dishes, you know, have a character that's pissed off at another character and they're having a silent fight, but they can't talk about it. And it's all meanwhile they're doing the dishes. And it was always some of my favorite reading from my students because they always were very, you never really know what to expect, and it's always so unique and interesting and fun. So that
Well,
was
it's
my
familiar.
favorite stuff.
We all wash the dishes, or hopefully we have all washed a dish in our life. So if you have two characters after a particularly tense Thanksgiving dinner at Aunt Ethel's house, where some godforsaken secret has come out, and now they're washing the dishes, and that can and she threw the dinner plate, and
It doesn't, but even not even that, it can be in the dialogue itself, which I really, really enjoy, right? It doesn't have to be anything to do with the actions. It's the choice of the words that we say, or even when you're, say, for example, at work and you want to ask a question to somebody, but you know that other people are listening in, so then you're trying to be cautious in the choice of your words, sort of thing.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we have all done that too.
Yeah.
But
So
I think
those are fun exercises to do if you are trying to figure that kind of stuff out as well.
yeah.
Well, and there's a term called code switching, where depending on who you're talking to, your word choice might change, your accent might change, like your whole demeanor in the way you approach it. And I think when you have like a character, what's that?
I do that a lot.
Well, I think we all do to some extent. I think marginalized populations have to do it more to kind of fit in. I think that's something that we can't unpack in this episode necessarily, but I think you talk up to your audience to some extent. You try to present yourself in a way that you want them to think you are up to their standards, I guess is the way I'll put it. And so having a character who might have a southern draw in one particular scene, and then they're talking to somebody else, and they totally switch up the way they talk, they switch up the word usage and things like that. That's again where subtext comes in, and they're talking to their boss, and they're like, yes boss, no boss, this and that, and then they're talking to a friend, and they're like, that mother, and they're digging in, like suddenly it's completely different. I think that's a way to get across a whole lot with dialogue without actually saying, and then he switched his tone. Like, you don't have to say that. The reader can pick up on it if you write it in a way that's pretty obvious.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. There's,
Cool.
we've all read some really bad dialogue in our day, and some cringy dialogue. I'm going back to the Nancy Drew thing. Hardy Boys
Nancy
also.
Drew.
I mean, it's good for fun, but you're not going to learn anything as a writer from reading a Nancy Drew book. Just, it's like I said, it's a palate cleanser. But it's just very, very fake, and that will turn me off from reading. I'll start a book and I will actually stop reading it over bad, unrealistic dialogue. I've done it several times. More times than I can count.
And I think that's probably a good place to call it an episode. Stop reading if
I hate bad dialogue, and I'll quit reading.
I mean, because the thing is, if anybody's still watching at this point in the episode, there's people who don't really care about dialogue, actually, that we totally missed with this episode, and that's fine. Like, there are people who want to know the materials that the starship is made out of. They want to know like the lineage of the main characters, like, you know, royal lineage and all that stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think what
Absolutely not. That's why we have Dune.
exactly. And I think that's a totally valid way of approaching reading and everything. I think in this episode we were just trying to target very specifically writing dialogue that is more than a sum of its parts. It's more than just what's in quotations. It brings the story alive, it makes it breathable, it makes it livable, and it immerses people who are looking for that. If you're not looking for that, that's okay. And so I just think, you know, you saying, you know, if it's bad dialogue, you're not interested. And then that's true for me. And I think David would probably fall somewhere in that camp as well. And so that's fine. That's not everybody, and we totally get that. So I figured I'd just sit there. And now we'll shift gears.
Prescribing
What's that?
anyone. I'm not proscribing anyone, you know, stop reading bad dialogue. But I think you can have a really good book, a really good narrative that doesn't rely on dialogue.
Yep.
As much as it relies on what you were saying, you know, like the hard science or the hard fantasy or you know, if I remember correctly, Ulysses by James Joyce doesn't have a lot of dialogue. It's not, you know, if you compare it to a Hemingway, you know, where Hemingway you will just have lines of dialogue and you may not even know who is saying what, you know, because it's just dialogue, flip the page, dialogue. You know, there are writers and there are works who can get away with that, and that's valid also.
All right. So that kind of wraps it up. We're going to shift gears now to do a little bit of self-promotion at the end of the episode when nobody's watching anymore, but that's okay. No, we appreciate everybody who is watching to the end, and I'm going to let Zev promote whatever he would like to promote on the show right now.
So this is my book that's available now. It's my first book. It's a collection of short stories, A Map of the World. Get it, buy it. Books make great gifts. Mm-hmm. And my novel will be out soon.
All About the Benjamins, right?
All About the Benjamins.
Cool.
I'm going to actually promote Zev Good's A Map of the World. It's really enjoyable. It's how many short stories is it? 7?
7. And, you know, really they're not short stories. They're just, that's why I clarify on the cover, it's just stories. Some of them are short, most of them are long, but not novellas.
Nah, they're nice tight reads. So I'm gonna go with shorter. But I really I feel bad because I read it on the e-reader, so it was somewhere in the middle was my favorite story, and I don't have it. But it's fantastic writing, and I definitely think that you should spend your money and pick it up and read Zev's book.
And I concur.
I'm not gonna. All right, so I'm not going to be the jerk that promotes anything else. The whole thing about this episode was we both read the book, and I was compelled to bring Zev on. So A Map of the World. I don't know. It speaks to you. It talks about life, death, and sex in a way that is accessible and profound at the same time, and that is hard to do. And so, hats off to Zev. Pick up A Map of the World. Dig in. You get all these little short stories, so you can pick them up. You can read them, and they end, and you're a little heartbroken because you wanted to know what's going to happen next. But the next story picks up, and you're immersed back in that next one. So. Yeah, definitely pick up A Map of the World, and you will not be disappointed.
And then don't forget to review it and tell your friends to pick it up as well.
Now you're talking.
Yes. Review.
Honest reviews. are always appreciated. So, and we appreciate everybody who's watched until this point. Thank you very much. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.